Howdy, howdy, folks, and welcome to Moose Podcast number 395, Capturing the Action. How you folks doing this fine week? Hey, it's trying to be spring, but believe it or not, we just got another 10 inches of snow on top of the peaks here in the Bitterroots. It's amazing the grasp. My heart goes out to you folks in tornado land. Boy, there were some real brutal ones. So I pray that you're all safe and sound. I remember the look on faces as we were storm chasing, people getting out of the path of that storm. So they're frightening things. Hey, I'm still using Adobe Podcasts, but I have upped the game a little bit, and the transcripts you'll find at Spotify and iTunes are a much better transcript as than the one that I post the blog post for the podcast. So if you want a better quality transcript, that's the place to go. Hey, another place to go coming up shortly. You have Photocon there at Bedford's in Little Rock. Great place to be. Some great speakers, really great folks from Bedford's, a lot of manufacturer representative. You can talk point blank. My good friend Terrence from Nikon, I know, will be there. He's going to have the new 28 to 400, which Bedford's has. So Bedford's is the great place just to hang out, talk to people, learn stuff, whether it be trivia or photography. They've got the inventory, got the great prices, got the Moose discount after you check out. So when you go to Bedford's, have some fun, buy some gear if you need it, and thank them for sponsoring the Mood Podcast because I am grateful that they do that. Capturing the action. I actually had a number of emails come in after I posted on last Friday photographs of the battling sanderlings, something that I had seen many, many times. I've been trying to get photographs of it since film days, but finally able to do it. And the email is basically summed up as what do I do to capture action, which really is a really a great question. Now, I've mentioned before how I set my camera up to photograph action. It's that way all the time. The motor drive is set to continuous high, so I'm getting 20 frames per second. I'm in aperture priority and controlling the depth of focus. So and if the lens is wide open, I'm going to have the fastest possible shutter speed, which is really kind of a critical thing because autofocus speed and firing rate are both governed by that shutter speed. I mean, if you're shooting 1 second exposures, your camera can't do 20 frames in a second because it's only taking 1 frame a second. So, yeah, that's the basics. But, well, what more is there to it? All right. Well, kind of made a list here. I'm going to start off with just to make sure everybody understands that shutter speed. If you look in the instruction book for your camera, you'll see when it talks about maximum firing rate, it will be a little asterisk and it will tell you the minimum shutter speed you can be at to get that maximum frames per second. That's really important. Now, shutter speed is a function of a couple things. One is the light falling on the scene. Two is the f-stop you have the lens set at. And three, the ISO of the camera. Now, referencing back to the photographs of the battling sanderlings it's on the Instagram, my Instagram posts as well as the my website. I was at ISO 1600. Yeah, you might have just felt the earth shake a little bit. Yes, I was at ISO 1600. It was dark. No if and buts about it. My shutter speed was hovering around 100, 1/100, and I saw it was coming. Now, what do I mean? Oh, I saw what was coming. Like I've said, I've watched these guys battle a lot. and they set up these temporary little territories, their own little, piece of turf or sand as it is, and they 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 run really quickly towards their opponent, whoever they think is offending or trespassing, and then they kind of hunch their feathers up. They get this almost triangular shape to their body. They kind of get a low profile, and then they both kind of get low, almost laying down on the sand, and then they just explode, and they go at it for, I don't know, 4 or 5 seconds maybe, if that long, and then they're done, and poof, they're out of there. So I knew that action was coming, and 1/100th of a second wasn't going to cut it. First of all, I wasn't going to get the maximum firing rate of the camera. Next, I wasn't going to freeze the action of those little guys. And I had a keep a rate of about 81%. I knew somebody would ask that, so it's about 81% of the images I took, I kept because the other ones were out of focus. And at 1600 ISO, some were out of focus, but that 1600 ISO brought my shutter speed up to almost a thousandth of a second. So that was, that's give you some basic ideas. These aren't like you got to carve them in stone and etch them in your hand. So when you have action, you use these numbers. That doesn't work that way. It's just in this scenario, that's what I did. So understand it's those components combined that allow the camera to do their thing. But, and here's the biggie, believe it or not, it's you, the person behind the camera, that really makes a difference in stopping and capturing an action. Now, the first thing to think about, and what I like to use, is, that lens, the focal length. I tend to want to have less lens, less focal length when I think action is going to happen than I would normally. So a quick kind of way of thinking of it, if I have the 600 millimeter, the Z600 TC on the lens, if I wanted to capture action, I would probably go to 300 millimeter. If the 600 has the 1.4 engage, I'm going to disengage it, go from 840 to 600. I'm going to want less focal length to capture action than I would otherwise. And why is that? Well, going back to those sanderlings, they're not little guys on the sand at this point. They're now got their wings wide open. There's two of them with their wings wide open, and they're jumping in the air. So you need to have space around your subject for the action to occur and for you to be able to capture without cutting off wings or car parts or arms or legs or whatever. So that's one of the things that I think about next when I know I'm going to be capturing action. I'm probably going to want less lens, less focal length than I would normally. It could be as much as 50% less. Next, I'm going to be thinking about that thing called peak of action. And peak of action is just this is old school, but it still works, still applies. And the easiest way I have to verbally describe peak of action is dribbling a basketball. And peak of action, when you dribble a basketball, there's two times in that dribble the ball actually stops. It's not moving at all, even though you're dribbling. The first time is when the ball hits the ground. When it hits that ground for that millisecond, it stops. It deflects and then it bounces back up. As it bounces back up, it goes up on its path of travel, and then it stops for a second before it drops back down. Those 2 points, the moment when it hits the ground, stops for a millisecond, and when it goes up, and stops for a millisecond before it goes back down. That's peak of action. Those 2 points. I tend to look for that. It's really old school, but that momentary stop permits me to get a sharp image. And when you shot film, of course, and you didn't have 20 frames per second, that's an innovation and luxury of modern times, not back then. That peak of action, that was about all you're going to get back then, especially if you didn't have a motor drive on your camera. You're relying on your thumb to wind that film. So that's the next thing I'm going to do is look at peak of action. Now, a modern tool that's kind of on that same vein is Nikon's auto capture. Now, they used to have a trap focused gizmo back in the days of film and some other things that worked pretty darn well. But the Nikon auto capture, especially the current version, is a pretty slick tool. Now, it's not 100%. Uh, you're going to get everything. And it's something like a lot of things in photography, you're going to have to, practice with it and work with it and fine tune it. It's not something that's just going to turn on and instantly work for you. But Nikon's auto capture is another way of capturing action. Now, the two things, peak of action and Nikon auto capture, rely on something that it's hard for me to communicate to photographers how important it is. But those two things rely on knowledge of the subject. I can't emphasize enough how important knowledge of the subject is in this scenario. So I was trying to think about what commonality, what kind of action can we all kind of relate to that knowledge of subject I could help kind of drum home how important that is. So I came up with the Blue Angels and the Thunderbirds or the Snowbirds. Those three really sweet air performance teams. If you want to talk about action, well, there you have it. They are spectacular in the air. If you go to an air show and you are green as green and you don't know your subject, you've not done your homework. Getting the peak of action, like that moment when they do the mirror or some other really cool acts they do in their performance, you're going to have to rely on luck more than anything else to get the shot of that action. Capturing it requires knowledge of the subject. Now, in this scenario, how could we acquire knowledge of the subject before we go to the air show? Well, all those teams, many of the flight teams, they have YouTube channels. There you go. YouTube University, as one friend of mine would call it. You could go there and you could watch their routine for the current year because they all kind of change them up a tad, either the order or how they do it, perform them, what have you. And you could go and you could see, for example, what they're going to do right before they do the mirror. The mirror is when two jets are flying and one is upside down, one is upright. There's a distance between them, but the optical illusion is that it looks like they're flying with their tires touching. They call it the mirror. You will, if you go and watch their routine, and you see what comes before the mirror, when you actually see that performed, oh, the mirror's coming next. And you can be at the right focal length, have the right shutter speed, exposure compensation, autofocus mode. You're all set because of knowledge of the subject. You're able to capture the action. So that's just a real simple dramatization of how you can make that work. Can we take that further? Well, of course. When it comes to my favorite thing, critters, there is a lot that you can know and understand if you just go and try to grasp basic biology. Now, most of the time when we go out and photograph critters, we have some sort of target species. Now, that species could be as specific as a golden eagle, or it could be as generic as birds. Now, in either case, birds gonna fly. And there's some basic things. Let's just go with the classic. You see a raptor defecate. That's the classic, generalization that the bird's about to fly. You see it, then capturing the action of the leaving of the perch and flapping and going, you would be set for it. And understand that, let's just stick with the golden eagle for a moment. If you're photographing it on the perch, you're going to probably be somewhat tight on the bird. So you get that either nice vertical or horizontal portrait. And if you stay that tight when you see it defecate and it launches, that 6 foot wingspan, you're going to cut off a minimum of 3 feet of it. You're going to have these, a golden eagle with two stumps. Not really the most attractive photograph, but with simple knowledge of the subject, you see it defecate, you might take off the teleconverter, you might zoom back, you might physically walk back. So you have less lens. So when it launches, you can get wingtip to wingtip in the viewfinder. And that's simple knowledge of the subject. That's how you go about capturing the action. Now, the very last variable in this whole process, and this is one that I wish I could sell. Heck, I wish I could just, can it for myself. That's plain old luck. Planned luck, okay, is definitely part of it. And I'll go back to the Sanderlings for an example. I knew about that biology, but like I mentioned it, I have been trying for years and years to capture that. So when I was on the beach at Boulevard Flats and I saw the territories form that one day, because I was there for 4 days, 5 days, I forget, and it didn't happen every day. There was a certain I wish I knew the variable, but there was one day the tide had brought in and deposited something we couldn't see, some little bit of food particles or little critters right at the high tide mark that the sanderlings wanted to feast on. And then there's the other sanderlings right at the wave line. And so they would come together and kind of defend their little feeding territories. It only happened one short period of time for maybe 3 hours, no, 2 hours, maybe not even that much. And so I saw it happening. But I was lucky that the tide did bring in and deposit in the sand whatever it is that sanderling wanted to defend. So I was lucky that happened, and it happened to happen close physically to me because they're little guys, right? You're talking about a bird that's smaller than your fist. So it had to be, relatively close. And it was all that part was luck. And the rest of it was knowing it could happen and everything I just mentioned, shutter speed and frames per second and all those kind of things. So capturing action. It's something that you work towards, you have in the back of your mind. So when the action unfolds, you can capture it. So I hope that helps and answers those email questions I got. That's the basic formula that I use for capturing action. You folks have a mighty fine week. Look forward to hearing from you. And remember to make every click your story.